So, those of you who saw the title of my talk, I called it, what did I call it? The Shady Side of the Sunny Side 2 - Anger. So if you were here for the Shady Side of the Sunny Side 1, what I looked at was the way that the popularity of movements such as the positive psychology produced a mass movement to happiness that you could, at the click of a button on your computer, get happy. And I looked at what real happiness is when we undertake this kind of path, this kind of training. By the way, there's been a good course correction, because now what you see is this smiley face, which is kind of splattered with some dark, because it now is the upside of the negative emotions that we are now looking at. So life has a way of correcting itself, but I use this sort of sunny side as a shorthand for happiness. And I ended my talk by quoting from the Buddha. What the Buddha said about happiness, he said, when you know for yourselves that these qualities are unskillful, these qualities are blameworthy, these qualities are criticized by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to harm and to suffering, then you should abandon them. And then he says, when you know for yourselves that these qualities are skillful, these qualities are blameless, these qualities are praised by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to welfare and happiness. So, should I do my artwork? Not yet, okay. I think what I want to do is to ask you to just close your eyes for a moment. You don't have to change your position, just close your eyes. And listen very attentively to this important question. Why don't Buddhists vacuum in the corners? Because they have no attachments. Okay, keep your eyes closed. All right, take a moment to feel what's happening on your face. When you laugh or you smile, some of you did, there are 15 facial muscles that contract. But take a moment just to be with these physical sensations around your eyes, the mouth. What about the chest, your shoulders, your arms, your legs? Just let your attention scan through with curiosity, a little gently, And what about your feeling tone? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, a mix, neutral? And what about mental activity? Are you aware of any internal conversations, clear or just whispery words, just an imprint of something? Can you hear any thoughts, comments in your mind? And how about visual images in front or just behind the eyelids? Can be thought of as an internal mental screen where images may appear or not very sharp or distinct, but just float your attention into this body-mind process if you want to reboot the question, why don't Buddhists vacuum in the corners? Because they have no attachments. And go back to the same places in your body as when you first began, and see what's there to know now. And then open your eyes and acknowledge that you just experienced, in a mindful way, an emotion. Whether it was joy or mirth or bewilderment or confusion or whatever it was, there was an emotional flavor, right? That is an energy. That's what emotions are. They are energies that we know are happening by what happens in the body and the mind. This was big news to me at about age 40. Somebody told me, this is what emotions are. They're body sensations and mental activity. And it was like, oh, I'd been in the desert of emotions for a long time. So I really have had to practice a lot feeling my feelings. And this might not be for most people. But one of the things, if you are able to contact this energy moving through you, is that it dances its dance. If uninterfered with, it's just moving energy. The problem is when there are more difficult emotions, the ones that we sort of relegate to under the carpet, we don't want to look at them, they cause discomfort, they give us the ickies. Those ones are more difficult. If they're subtle, they're sort of not big, they're hard to track. But anger is an amazing emotion to work with. And it's a very important emotion. So, have you ever been angry in your life? Hands up. Full house, okay? It's just part of our evolutionary biology that we have these feelings. They came around. Oops, sorry about that. Another Deva just came by, so thank you, hon. Let's see. They are not to be feared. They are not to be, hidden away. But we do this a lot, especially with things like anger. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize when we did that little piece about, what you were feeling is this word, no. The Satipatthana Sutta, which is the discourse on mindfulness, from which our tradition is so deeply, deeply founded upon, uses the word no repetitively all the time, I gave you one of those little phrases. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. And when we are able to bring that to our emotions, there's a nice little piece in the third foundation. There are 4 foundations of mindfulness. The one is the body, the feeling tones was the second one. The third one is the mind, under which our emotions and thoughts are categorized. This is what it says. It says, he knows a lustful mind to be lustful, and a mind without lust to be without lust. He knows an angry mind to be angry, and a mind without anger to be without anger. He knows a deluded mind to be deluded, and similarly without delusion. There are another bunch of words such as a contracted mind, a distracted mind, a narrow mind, a surpassable and unsurpassable, concentrated, but the point is the knowing. And that's what we do. When we sit down to meditate, what can become known to us? So mindful observation is often compared to using a mirror, which simply reflects whatever is presented to it. We maintain bare awareness of the present condition without allowing reactions to arise. It's not so easy when we deal with anger, particularly strong anger. And, sorry for my oops, but that's very important. Okay. So, I don't think most of us here have a lot of explosive rage, right? I mean, that's one end of the continuum of anger. On the side of the continuum, there's this sort of like, just slightly annoyed, a little bit irritable. So just, look into your own thoughts. Where am I on this continuum, of anger? And while you check into that, I had some fun looking up words that are the angry words. You ready for this? Okay. Acrimony, animosity, annoyance, antagonism, displeasure, enmity, exasperation, fury, hatred, impatience, indignation. Ire, irritation, outrage, passion, rage, resentment, temper, violence, chagrin, choler, conniption, dander, distemper, gall. Huff, infuriation, irascibility, irritability, miff, peevishness, petulance, pique, rankling, soreness, storm, tantrum, tiff, umbrage, vexation, blow up, cat fit, hissy fit, ill temper, ill humor, mad, slow burn. This is a big list, It's like, By the way, I Googled the word anger. You know how many hits I got? 713 million. That's a lot of anger stuff going along, isn't it? Huh? But, when I looked into my own life, I began to really contact the fact that I'm not so much in this sort of like really full-blown rage category, but I named a certain irritability and a certain grumpiness. So I looked up grumpy, cantankerous, crotchety, grouchy, irritable, sullen, surly, testy, bad-tempered, crabby, cross, disgruntled, dissatisfied, griping, grumbling, peevish, pettish, petulant, querulous, sulky, truculent, annoyed, edgy, disagreeable, fretful, snappish, snappy, ugly, waspish, irascible, nasty, and for those who come from Britain or New Zealand, tetchy, ratty. But why I did this was because I spent a lot of my life disowning any kind of negative emotion. And particularly for women, I'll tell you that anger is a difficulty. So here's what one of the more modern writings, a woman by the name of Harriet Lerner, in The Dance of Anger, this is what she says. She says, anger is a signal and one worth listening to. Our anger may be a message that we are being hurt, that our rights are being violated, that our needs or wants are not being adequately met, or simply that something is not right. Just as physical pain tells us to take our hand off the hot stove, the pain of anger preserves the very integrity of ourself. The integrity of ourself. Women, however, have long been discouraged from the awareness and forthright expression of anger, that even knowing when we are angry is not a simple matter. When a woman shows her anger, she is likely dismissed as irrational or worse. We learn to fear our own anger. Anger is something we feel. It exists for a reason and always deserves our attention. We all have a right to everything we feel, and certainly our anger is no exception. Well, now I'd like you to contrast that with what the Buddhist texts tell us about anger. And I think that we need to acknowledge both culture and history and translation of terms. But for the Buddha, where are you? Here's what it is said. Abandon anger. When anger arises, whoever keeps firm control, as if with a racing chariot, him I call a master charioteer. Anyone else, a rein holder. That's all. Conquer anger with lack of anger. Guard against anger erupting in body. Guard against anger erupting in speech. Guard against anger erupting in mind. And there are many, many times in the discourses of the Buddha that he tells us not only not to, be angry, but stop the arising of anger. I find this really, work. It requires effort. In fact, it is in the Eightfold Path where we have right effort. That's one of the things that's there. You've got to watch unwholesome thoughts before they've even arisen. And then, when they're arisen, away. Here's another kind of graphic description of anger. It says, as a log from a pyre, burnt at both ends and fouled in the middle, serves neither for firewood in the village nor for timber in the forest, so is such a wrathful man. So we got here. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me of my property. Whosoever harbors such thoughts will never be able to still their enmity. Never indeed is hatred stilled by hatred. It will only be stilled by non-hatred. This is an eternal law. So, I'm going to tell you two stories. In fact, I might have to skedaddle over some, but this one comes from those ancient times in a different country long ago as a teaching about anger. It's called the anger-eating demon. Once there lived a demon who had a peculiar diet. He fed on the anger of others. And as his feeding ground was the human world, there was no lack of food for him. He found it quite easy to provoke a family quarrel or national and racial hatred. Even to stir up a war was not very difficult for him. And whenever he succeeded, once a war started, hate multiplies by its own momentum and affects even normally friendly people. So the demon's food supply became so rich that he sometimes had to restrain himself from overeating, being content with nibbling just a small piece of resentment found close by. But, as is often happens with successful people, he became rather overbearing, and one day when feeling bored, he thought, shouldn't I try it with the gods? On reflection, he chose the heaven of the 33 deities, ruled by Sakka, Lord of Gods. He knew only a few of these gods had entirely eliminated the fetters of ill will and aversion, though they were far above petty and selfish quarrels. So, by magic power, he transferred himself to that heavenly realm and was lucky enough to come at a time when Sakka, the divine king, was absent. There was none in the large audience hall. And without much ado, the demon seated himself on Sakka's empty throne, waiting quietly for things to happen, which he hoped would bring him a good feed. Soon, the same of the gods came to the hall, and first they could hardly believe their own divine eyes. They saw the ugly demon sitting on the throne, squat and grinning. Having recovered from their shock, they started to shout and lament, "Oh, you ugly demon, how can you dare sit on the throne of the Lord? What utter cheekiness! What a crime! You should be thrown headlong into hell, straight into a boiling cauldron. You should be quartered alive. Begone, begone. But while the gods were growing more and more angry, the demon was quite pleased because from moment to moment he grew in size, in strength, and in power. The anger he absorbed into his system started to ooze from his body as a smoky red glowing mist. This evil aura kept the gods at a distance, and their radiance was dimmed. Suddenly a bright light appeared at the end of the hall, and it grew into a dazzling light from which Saka emerged, the king of gods. He who had firmly entered the undeflectable stream that leads nirvana-wards was unshaken by what he saw. The smoke screen created by the god's anger parted when he slowly and politely approached the usurper of his throne. "Welcome, friend. Oh, no, please remain seated. I can take this other chair. May I offer you a drink of hospitality? Amrita is not bad this year. Or do you prefer a little stronger brew, like the Vedic Soma?" While Saka spoke these friendly words, the demon rapidly shrank into a diminutive size and finally disappeared, trailing behind a whiff of malodorous smoke, which likewise soon dissolved. It's kind of fun to, just picture this demon feeding with anger. And if we bring that into our modern times, I think there are lots of demons feeding on a lot of anger. And so, for my modern tale of the evening, I discovered something very, very new to me a little while ago. And it's a big story, and here it is. Okay, so I learned what trolls are. Trolls. Not the mythical cave-dwelling ones from Nordic tales, but the ones that prowl the internet. Their appearance is equally ugly. A troll is a person who sows discord on the internet by starting arguments or upsetting people by posting inflammatory remarks, insults, hateful, vituperative, and cruel at times. Trolls harass, threaten, and stalk the subjects of their ire. One such troll singled out a writer, performance artist, strong, outspoken feminist, a woman so comfortable in her own skin, so confident and so accomplished, by the name of Lindy West. This story was on This American Life, so if any of you want to go and give yourself a real treat, you can listen to this whole story. So, in her own words, she says, "One summer afternoon in 2013, I got a message on Twitter from my dead dad. I don't remember what it said exactly. I didn't keep a copy for my scrapbook, but it was mean. And my dad was never mean, so it couldn't really be from him. Also, he was dead. Just 18 months earlier, I'd watched him turn grey and drown in his own lungs, so I was like 80% sure. But there it was, a message. Some context, she sets the stage for the fact that in the summer of 2013, in certain circles on the internet, comedians and feminists were at war over rape jokes. I mean, don't you just shake your head like, what? Being both a comedy writer and a committed feminist killjoy, I weighed in with an article in which I said that I think a lot of male comedians are careless with the subject of rape. So we'll skip what she writes next, but it's a sample of some of these unbelievably cruel, nasty, obscene, threatening, terrific outpourings of something that I just couldn't believe. So she says it went on like that for weeks. It's something I'm used to. I have to be. Being insulted and threatened online is part of my job, which is not to say it doesn't hurt. It does. When I got that message from my dad, it was well into rape joke season. I was eating 30 rape jokes for breakfast at that point, and I thought I was coping. But if you get a blade sharp enough, it'll cut through anything. The account was called Paul West Dunzo. Paul West because his name was Paul West, and Dunzo because I guess he was done. He was done being alive, done doing crossword puzzles, done forcing me to sing duets at dinner parties, and so on. He was done being my dad. The little bio on Twitter read, "Embarrassed father of an idiot. Other two kids are fine though." His location, dirt hole in Seattle. The profile photo was a familiar picture of him. He's sitting at his piano, smiling in the living room of the house where I grew up. The person who made the Paul West Dunzo account clearly had put some time into this. They'd researched my father and my family. They'd found out his name, and then they figured out which Paul West, among all the Paul Wests on the internet, and they knew I had a brother and a sister, all that they knew. They must have known that he had recently died. Conventional wisdom says don't feed the trolls, don't respond, it's what they want. I do that. It doesn't help. She decides, what can she do? If she's silent, she says, I'm stuck. What should I do? If I respond, I'm a sucker. If I don't respond, I'm a punching bag. So I did what you're not supposed to do. I fed the troll. I wrote about Paul West Dunzo in an article for Jezebel.com. This is important. I wrote sadly, candidly, angrily about how much it hurt, how much that troll had succeeded. And then something amazing happened. The morning after the post went up, I got an email. Hey Lindy, I don't know why, or even when I started trolling you, it wasn't because of your stance on rape jokes. I don't find them funny either. I think my anger toward you stems from your happiness with your own being. It offended me because it served to highlight my unhappiness with my own self. So one of the things that anger does, the powerful sense of how we split off and we don't know ourselves and we project that. Our unknown face goes out into the world. He then says, I can't say how sorry enough I am. It was the lowest thing I've ever done. When you included it in the Jezebel article, it finally hit home. There is a living, breathing human being who's reading this bleep. I'm attacking someone who never harmed me in any way and for no reason. So this is important because anger is often only there when we separate self from other. When you don't see the other person, you kind of can dehumanize them. And never has there ever been a more perfect way of doing this than behind the screen of your computer. Right? People do the most dastardly things, thinking that, it's like, can be anonymous. Anyway, I'll skip little bits, but she was just totally amazed. Lindy said that she'd never, in all her time, she spoke to all her friends, nobody had ever received an apology. So he also gave me his name, she says, but I could have posted it online, which he knew, but I didn't. And I'm not going to be saying it here either. So a couple of themes that I'm picking up here, and I hope you can too. There's something about our common humanity that's beginning to come through in this story, right? he suddenly begins to think of her as a human being, and that he read her words, how much she was hurt. She spoke. And the other thing that I think is remarkable is her restraint. I mean, she could have plastered his name all over the internet. And this is often what the Buddha teaches us, you know. He says, restrain yourself, have forbearance. Don't, retaliate in the way that somebody has just lobbed their arrows at you. Have restraint. I don't know where to put this. Sorry, folks. So anyway, she says, this was about 18 months ago, and she says, I still get trolled every day. And I'm thinking, if I could get through to one troll, the meanest one I ever had, couldn't I feasibly get through to any of them, all of them? Was he special, or did I do something right? And then she realized she could ask him. And 18 months later, there is a recorded telephone call between her and the man. She just calls him the man. And you hear this most poignant exchange of real, human, tender spot heart. But she wants to know, I got to understand, why did you do this? So here are some things that I'm going to highlight. He says, well, it revolved around one issue that you write about a lot, which is your being heavy. The struggles you had regarding being a woman of size, or whatever the term may be. And Lindy says, you can say fat. That's what I say, fat. So here we have one of those places where everywhere around us we can know discrimination, right? We have been studying racial discrimination. We have been looking at all ways in which we look at others and distance ourselves. And this here, the social stigma of being a large person, fat, is right here. That's what made him so angry, that she was comfortable, confident, at home in her own body. He told me that at the time he was about 75 pounds heavier than he wanted to be. He hated his body. He was miserable. And reading about fat people, particularly fat women, accepting and loving themselves as they were, infuriated him for reasons he couldn't articulate at the time. So there's a whole other piece about how he admits to a certain misogyny. That, no, it's not that I don't like women. I love my mother, I love my sister, I've had girlfriends. But he says, if I really loved women, I would never have done that. I would never be putting out this kind of emotional damage to a person, a woman. All right, so what's amazing about this Lindy is her empathy and her compassion. She wants to understand where this person's anger is coming from. They talk on the phone for 2 hours. She says, he was trolling me for being loud and fat when he was at a low point in his life. He hated his body, his girlfriend dumped him, he sat in front of the computer in an unfulfilling job. And so this guy who's so out of touch with what's going on with him, he just throws it out, right? But gradually he changed. He enrolled in graduate school, found a relationship, started teaching little kids. He had a purpose. His interest in trolling dried up. So she, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over things and I'm just going to say what she said. Trolls still waste my time and tax my mental health on a daily basis. But honestly, I don't wish them any pain. This is a Buddha Dharma right there. This is what the Buddha said. Their pain is what got us here in the first place. That's what I learned from my troll. If what he said is true, that he just needed to find some meaning in his life, then what a heartbreaking diagnosis for all of the people who are still at it. He says, I can't give purpose and fulfillment to millions of anonymous strangers, but I can remember not to lose sight of their humanity the way that they lost sight of mine. Humans can be reached. Empathy, boldness, kindness, those are the things I learned from my dad, though he never knew how much I'd need them. She said, it's something that is written in the suttas. This is from the Buddha. And it says, who doth not, when reviled, revile again, a twofold victory wins, both of the other and herself. She seeks the good, for she the other's angry mood doth understand, and groweth calm and still. She, who of both is a physician, since herself her healeth, and the other too. So here's a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He says, if only it was all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it was necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? So I'll end with a little poem. This is called Advice. You know how after it rains, my father told me one August afternoon, when I struggled with something hurtful, my best friend had said, you know how worms come out and crawl all over the sidewalk, and it stays a big mess a long time after it's over if you step on them? Leave them alone, he went on to say after clearing his throat. And when the rain stops, they crawl back into the ground. So I thank you so much for your attention and your being here, and I wish you all well.